Hello, and welcome to the 2TAKES podcast with Shannon and April. Excited to spend another portion of your week with us on topical discussions that I am sure you're going to find fascinating because you're joining us every week, right? So this week's topic is sometimes effort is the only thing you need to give yourself a competitive advantage. So to say that again, effort is sometimes the only thing you need to give yourself or your company a competitive advantage. This came to me as a topic to share with you guys because of a couple stories that I've encountered. And then, of course, I'm sure we can all dive into our personal experiences with customer service or interactions we've had that will support this exact topic that we're going to explore today. So I'll kick this off. I won't put April on the spot this week. But I looked at this going, a lot of times in business coaching or company planning, we talk about, well, what's your competitive advantage? And what happens oftentimes, which is interesting because we see and experience the mindset right away, is a lot of times it's the negative. Like we'll cite out, well, our competitor has deeper pockets, or our competitor has longevity in the marketplace, or our competitor has several locations, or they have more staff to capitalize on opportunity. Whatever it may be citing a competitor's seemingly strength that may not necessarily be true because we don't know the whole story, but they may have access to things that you don't. And so then comes the topic of, well, how do I compete with deeper pockets? And there's always going to be a company out there that, or an executive, if you're in the executive space, that someone that you're up against for a sales opportunity, that their company has deeper pockets, whatever it may be, that there's always going to be someone that can outspend you, always. And so my thought is, when I support businesses that are smaller, what can they own in the space that would make them competitive that does not require money? And what's interesting, as you may have learned about us, depending on when you've joined the podcast, is that I own other businesses too. And I have always been on the spectrum of scale, a tiny business. Very good businesses, which I'm elated to have in the marketplace, but there were always things that I could own that were my advantage over my bigger competitors. Sometimes it is just honestly the agility that a small business gives, right? We can change things quicker than big businesses can. So that costs us usually nothing because we can adopt something new and implement it quickly. But one of the things that we can always do if we're a solopreneur, if we are an executive, if we are a business, small, medium, or large, is effort. And where do we apply that effort? So how this came to me is a good friend of mine told me a story. He's in real estate. And he tells me the story that this person was listing their house for sale by owner. Sometimes that goes really smooth. Sometimes it doesn't go very smooth. And he was at the point that he was considering listing with an agent, unbeknownst to any other agent, right? So these agents, they're sending brochures. Why use home real estate, Woods real estate, Remax real estate, whatever it may be. They are sending all these brochures or postcards or emails, and they're sending all of this. And one agent writes a handwritten note and said, hey, I looked at your home. I see so many positives, and I know what I can bring to the table will highlight those positives. And so, number one, he acknowledged his time and effort by a handwritten note, sent it, acknowledged that he had looked at his house online or toured it, whatever the case may be. And so the guy calls him up, the guy selling the house calls him up and says, hey, I want you to come and discuss a possible home listing. So the realtor shows up and they talked about the home listing, and the guy goes, hold on just a second, goes back in the room, pulls out all these brochures and says, here's your competition, and gives him all these brochures, mailers. And the realtor's like, okay. what am I looking at here exactly? And he goes, this is everybody that's mailed me, mailed me their material. And the realtor's like, well, how did I earn your business? Or did I earn your business? I'm not sure what the case may be, but asks why. And he goes, you were the only one that hand wrote a letter to me or hand wrote a note card to me. And he goes, his reflection back when he takes this back to his friends and colleagues in the space is he goes, it took me nothing more than showing effort. And so I kind of tuck those little stories in my back pocket because it's when you hear that and you think about experiences that I've had in my businesses is sometimes it's just effort. And sometimes what that effort is just honestly keeping your word. What you say you're going to do, you do. And it could set you up for great success where maybe those with bigger pockets rely on big marketing dollars, but then their delivery, their follow through, their experience, how they make their customers feel does not equate to the money that they can pour in on the front end of that customer funnel. So it just brings up so many points as to go, what does effort look like for you in your role or your business or what your company can put forth? So April, what's your take on effort?
So if you joined us at all, you'll know that my take on things is usually more inward facing for a company. My take on effort has to do with primarily probably management, might be the business owners, C-suite directors, those types of people. But honestly, it applies to anybody. But, there's the saying that's been floating around for a while now that people don't quit bad companies, they quit bad bosses, which I give that like a 60-40. I don't think that's entirely true. But that's a topic for another day. But I do think about the human component of managing people and the fact that, you can either be the type of person that ignores your employees all the time. You can be a present but absentee boss or manager, or you can make the effort to take the time out of your day to go around and chat for a couple minutes with each of your employees. Now, if you are in a really, really big company, you may have to break that down and give pieces to, your managers or your directors or whatever. But actually making that effort to connect on a human level, personal level, and then take that a step farther with really learning about those people as individuals. What motivates them? What do they like to do when they're not at work? What are their passions? What are their side hustles? Because that can then dictate different ways that you can potentially provide incentives to them. Maybe it's a whole host of things, but some employees may not be motivated by money. Some employees may be motivated by wanting to get off work a little bit earlier so that they can do X, Y, or Z on any given day of the week. But if you don't talk to them, if you don't make that effort to get to know them, and more than just lip service, but actually chat with them, get to know who they are as a person, you're never going to be able to see those retention possibilities, promotion possibilities. You may learn about talents that you had no clue that individual had, that maybe your company doesn't need right now, but that you can put in your back pocket and utilize later on. So that's the effort that I see, is putting that human personal stock back into your employees, by, making them feel valued, appreciated, seen, known, heard, all of those things, again, takes a bit of time, takes $0 unless you want to provide financial incentives. But sometimes that just makes all the difference. And
yeah,
that's my take on it.
I think you're revealing so many layers of this. So I think through business coaching, one of the 4 areas of mastery, the first levels, is delivery. So like you said, mind forward facing, a lot of times working on the business side of things, is what are we going to deliver our clients? Tried and true, that they can count on. Because then if they're going to refer, they're going to say, I always get this service. Whoever I refer is going to get this service. It's not, well, I did once, So we talk about delivery forward and outward facing. And then you bring it into the management side, which makes sense because that's the hat that you wear, is how do we what are the deliverables we give our staff and our team? What do they experience authentically and routinely, consistently, all of those things. And then if I were to go down yet another layer, is if you're joining this podcast and you're not in a management position, and you are an employee or an executive, is again, what is your deliverable out to your company, your supervisor? And all 3 of these, I would say the commonality is being intentional. Having that intentionality behind it is, what are we intentionally and deliberately and consistently giving our clients, our employees? And then as an employee, what am I being consistent with? What if I'm part of my sales staff? I'm part of a sales staff. What am I intentionally, consistently delivering back up the chain for communication to my supervisors or my sales manager? What efforts am I taking? What am I doing consistently to bring a lead through? This can be so much applied on every layer of responsibility, because we all need to take our own responsibility for what we do, from an employee to a manager to a business owner, all of which we need to be intentional and deliberate of the choices we make and how we behave. And I think too, being authentic about that is what speaks about who I am as an individual, because in the scenario that you're in sales or forward facing, is they're buying you, right? Their first point of trust is built with you, or their first experience at the coffee house is with the frontline people, not the owner. So that level of intentionality and responsibility on every layer of a company is super important. Speaking of a coffee house in particular, because oftentimes I have meetings at coffee houses and I have my favorites, but
the irony is that Shannon doesn't drink coffee.
Yeah, that's the irony of it all. You'll see me with an iced tea or chai tea typically. Rough days, maybe a hot chocolate, but oh yeah, it's, I kind of feel like I'm unauthentic when I say, hey, you want to have coffee? And then inside I'm like, you're not going to order coffee. It's like, it's not about that, Shannon. But I saw this story on Facebook Reels because I had just my little scrolling time this weekend. And one of the stories that I really liked was this guy was saying that he was sitting in a coffee house and he was working, reading, doing whatever he was doing. And he overhears a conversation of a guy coming in, going up to the counter, and the barista saying, oh, where's so-and-so? So his assumption is he must have always come in with a friend or a colleague, and he doesn't hear specifics, but he hears, oh, he's no longer with us. What that means, I don't know. Did he move? Did he pass away? I don't know the reality of it. But the barista, number one, took it upon herself to care enough to ask, realize who her consumer was, and that he had a norm that she was aware of. She came around and sat down with him and had a conversation with him. Comped his coffee. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying that she took the time. She took the time to plug in. And the takeaway from this guy who just happens to be in the realm of this experience goes, you know what? That person that came in for coffee that day probably didn't feel like a consumer. He didn't feel like a customer. He didn't feel like a number. He didn't feel like a grande latte. He felt like a member of a community. And that community that day just happened to be the coffee house that he chose to be a regular at. And so it was just interesting knowing that we're going to talk to you guys about this at some point, happens to be today, is going, wow, that took nothing other than being aware and caring enough to be more than an order taker. So I just look at those things going, what can we do on any layer of the company that we're in? Think about that this week as going, what are we going to be intentional about? What effort can we put in places that we know will move the needle if we're consistent? So do a self-evaluation. Think about that, because I think that you'll find that it will take very, very little to make huge impacts on the relationships you build, the consistency that people experience and appreciate about you, really the reputation of your company or yourself in the marketplace. It will take very little. The last experience that I had and this is again, once you start thinking about these things in this way, you will start seeing them everywhere. You'll start noticing them everywhere. I'm training you guys as we bring these things forward to be cognizant of them, because you're going to start seeing, oh, wow, that happened there. Oh, I noticed that. So I happen to be checking out my groceries at Walmart this weekend. I'm doing my little checking, scanning, doing my thing. And I hear, and this hadn't happened in a long time. I don't know. It's probably per Walmart. I don't know. But remember they used to give out little stickers to the kids, the little happy face stickers? Ours has not done that to my knowledge, or things that I've noticed in a long time. And this frontline supervisor that was kind of monitoring the self-checkouts, she had this roll of stickers again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a flashback. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't just kind of heard. She apparently had given this little kid a sticker, and the little sticker goes, oh, or the little kid goes, oh, wow, it's her. And he was like super excited, and my ears kind of perked up. I didn't see the initial thing, but I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, they used to give out stickers. That's funny. I would have forgotten about it had I not seen it. And the mom said, oh, that's so exciting. What do you say? Well, the supervisor had walked off. This little kid goes, hey, so much for this. And he was so excited. And I thought it was interesting because that mom left with a good experience because her kid's happy to get a sticker. The kid's happy to get a sticker. And because he yelled, thank you, learned some manners, everyone around said, hey, that kid was super happy to get that sticker. And I was just thinking about that going, when we talk about consistency, it's like, man, they used to do this and they didn't. And they went back to it, and look at the impact. It still picked up right where it was on just a little simple thing that made the mom's day, the kid's day, and probably made my day because I'm like, oh, that's super cool. A happy thing today that kid gets to go home with. So as you reflect, just think about how very little effort you have to have and put forth to blow people out the water and just sing your praises and become your super fans. It will take very, very little, I promise.
It might take stepping out of your comfort zone just a tiny bit. Like the coffee house example Shannon gave, who knows if that barista was a outgoing person or a very touchy-feely person or something like that. But whatever it was about that situation struck her enough to do what she did. So, and like I talked earlier about talking with employees and those types of things, That's not hardwired into some people,
Mhm.
but it is something that you can start and learn and work on. And it's not a do or die type of thing. So nothing horrible is going to happen if you stop by Susan's office and say hi and ask her how her weekend was. But it's effort that you're putting forth. So
Absolutely. Good points, April. And I would love if you guys, like we said, we would love for this to be an interactive dialogue, and we've built your trust enough that you will do comments and let us know. But tell us some of the things that you guys do or you want to commit to do. What efforts that you're going to put in that are just going to set you above perhaps even part of your competition, or put you in that realm of competition because you've upped your personal game. So we would love to hear what you guys are going to do or have done or continue to do, so we can all grow and be inspired by all the simple little things that we put into play in our lives. That's the Take Two podcast this week. We will see you next week for another exciting topic. Bye-bye.
bye.